Before we get started, we'd like to thank EMC Bond for sponsoring this episode of Let's Get Surety. EMC Bond prioritizes personalized service in every aspect of their business. When you partner with them, you'll receive stable, responsive, and timely solutions rooted in strong relationships. To learn more about EMC Bond, their products, services, and personalized approach, visit emcinsurance.com/bond. Now, on to our show.
You're listening to Let's Get Surety. Let me hear your bonding talk with Kat Shamapande.
Hey everyone, it's Kat Shamapande. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Let's Get Surety. I've got with me today my co-host, Mark McCallum, CEO of NASBP. Thanks for being on again today, Mark.
Absolutely. Hi, Kat. Thanks for having me back.
I am thrilled to have you, and I'm excited to talk about this topic today. We're going to be talking about the producer's role in the claims process.
Pretty important topic with some special guests.
Exactly. So to start us off, we have John Bondy, member and chair of the Fidelity and Surety practice at CSG Law. Hey, John, thanks for being on.
Thanks so much for having me. Nice to be here. Hope all is well.
It's great to have you. We also have with us today Robert Coon, Vice President of Surety at Scott Insurance. Thanks for being on, Robert.
Glad to be here.
And last but definitely not least is Marilyn Klinger, LA Office Manager, Managing Partner at SMTD Law. Thanks for being with us today, Marilyn.
You're welcome.
Well, before we dive into talking about the producer's role in the claims process, John, you want to start us off and just tell us a little bit about yourself and about CSG Law?
Well, I've been with CSG for 28 years, and we have a full-service surety practice within a full-service law firm headquartered in New Jersey, and most of our work is in New York and New Jersey, but the surety practice is somewhat nationwide, primarily on the claims side, but we do a good amount of work on the front end, preparing indemnity agreements, reviewing collateral agreements, contract review, project formation issues, things like that. So we interact with primarily claims people, but a good amount of time with underwriting counsel and sometimes on the producer side as well.
Well, with all that background and the claims focus, I'm sure you're going to have a wealth of knowledge to share with us in this conversation. Robert, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Scott Insurance?
Sure. Been with Scott for about 25 years, in the surety industry for about 41. And Scott is a regional agency based in Virginia with offices in the Carolinas and Tennessee. So.
All right, terrific. Marilyn, can you tell us about yourself and about SMTD Law?
Sure. I'm a 46-year lawyer,
just starting out.
Brand new, having done construction and surety the entirety of my career. And because I've been around so long, it's time to start moving into a little bit different focus, which is neutral work, doing arbitration and mediation focused on the disputes on the construction project. Rumors have it, because I know both surety and construction, I'll be very popular. We will see. My firm, I'm staying with my firm to do that, is SMTD Law, which is a 18-lawyer boutique which focuses on construction and surety. And we have offices in Orange County, Los Angeles, that's the one I run, in Oakland, and in Phoenix.
That's terrific. Well, let's dive in and start talking about the producer's role in the claims process. Where do you want to start with this, Mark?
Well, first of all, do they have a role, right?
I think that's a good question.
But, we all know surety is a relationship business, and one of the key components of that is the relationship that the producer has with the principal. And they're a confidant and a trusted advisor for that client. So they know the client very well, and you would think that that could be an advantage in a surety claims situation if that unfortunately arises. What do you think of that, John? Is that a correct assumption, or?
It is, and I think that people on the claim side do view the producer as aligned initially and foremost with the principal. The agent is the one who places the principal with the surety. The agent normally has the discretion to shop the principal to various potential surety markets, and an experienced claims professional in-house or outside is going to understand from the outset that the producer is looking out first for his or her account's interests. As outside claims counsel, my role is to look out for the surety's interest, and the claims professional to whom I report, she or he is looking first to his or her company's interest. But that doesn't mean that there is an unavoidable friction between the two. There can be, if not an alignment or a mutual overlap of interest, there can be an alignment of interest. I want to keep the loss down.
Right.
I want to respond to the claim effectively. I want to do that cost effectively. I want to deal with loss reduction and mitigation. The surety is also going to be looking for loss recovery, and that is sometimes where the greatest friction is going to be between the claims professional and the account and the producer.
John, what people forget about is that all of these producers are agents, and they're agents for both the principal and the surety company. And they need to be reminded that they owe allegiance and maybe even fiduciary obligations to both. Have you found that they forget that particular part of their obligation?
They always forget that part of their obligation.
I'm not sure about always.
Well, look, the account is where the agent makes his or her living. And so they're going to, out of their self-interest, and this is not a criticism, but it's an observation of the reality of life, is if I'm a producer, my accounts are how I make my living. In part, how I also make my living is my credibility vis-a-vis the underwriting markets to which I market my accounts. And unless I want to burn bridges as a producer, I have to make sure that I am candid and honest with my surety markets, and that I am taking a account to a market that is appropriate for that account. And I do think, in speaking with producers whom I know more personally than professionally, there are certain sureties that they avoid because they think the claims process is too heavy-handed. And as soon as a claim comes in...
Yeah, let's ask Robert what his experience is.
I agree with that, but I also think, and I've told this to my clients, is, if you go into claims, the only way I'm going to make any more money out of you is to help you get through that, which that's working with the adjusters on the claims, because y'all are looking at both sides. The surety's not going to pay any more on a claim than they absolutely need to, but they need that contractor's perspective to be able to give them any defenses that may be there. And it may not be a defense against the claim, but it may be documentation on change orders and subrogation that may be available to them to avoid additional costs.
So, Robert, one of the things you said that I want to pick up on is you said the surety's not going to pay more than they have to. I think that both the producers and the principals don't agree and think the surety just wants to get rid of the file, so to speak, and will overpay. As a mediator, by the way, the sureties are always ready to pay. So there is clearly some legitimacy to that concern.
There is a concern there. And I have seen, particularly on either small claims or full value claims, where the surety is just ready to write a check and walk away. And that's unfortunate.
Well, but what you said earlier, wasn't it that there is commonality? It's about mitigation and being efficient. So isn't that an interest that they all share ultimately?
Well, yes and no, because talking about, the surety's always there to write a check. The big debate is, in my experience, is more about the amount of the check than the concept of writing a check. Because the surety is also going to look at the expense incurred in fighting the fight. And when you have a small claim, they become sort of cost prohibitive to dispute the claim. And the principal may say, I don't owe this money. It's a $20,000 claim. Am I going to spend $10,000 to fight a $20,000 claim that might settle for $10,000 or $15,000? Why not settle it on day one at $17,500 and be done with it? Now that changes when you start adding some zeros to the back of that number,
right?
And you need to sort of, in many instances, look at the law of the state where you're in. There is no contractor who wants to pay a sub or a vendor before the contractor's been paid.
John, let me ask you something. And actually, I want to ask Robert also. In your experience, has the producer helped to convince the bond principal that the fight isn't worth it? There's a point at which, just what you said, John, which is you got to look at the expense size also. Have you had experience where the producer helps in that regard?
Sometimes, yes. It depends on, in part, the surety claim side and how involved they want the producer to be. There are some sureties that when it comes to claims, they don't want to hear from the producer. They don't want to hear from the underwriter. Once it's in claims, it belongs to claims. It used to belong to you. It doesn't anymore. Others would like the producer to be a conduit for information. And sometimes if the principal who doesn't have experience with the surety claims process doesn't understand, well, why do you want to pay this? I want to pay it because it's due. Now, you may disagree as to the amount that's due, but there's some amount that's due. And if it's a matter of timing, you would like the producer to be able to say, look, this is effectively a short-term loan. And you need the surety's buy-in to convince the principal that I'm not suing you tomorrow. All right, assuming you're not going to dissipate your assets and this is an isolated claim, it's not a program default, and by that term I mean you're going down the job on every single project that you have, and unfortunately we come across those. But it's an isolated claim for an otherwise solid account. You're in a dispute with the owner, the money's not flowing, but that's not a defense to the subs. Don't kick the can down the road. If you can settle it now for less and avoid the expense, bring the producer in, have him or the principal's lawyer explain to them, I'm not looking to drop an axe on your head, but I don't want to waste time and money fighting claims and kicking the can down the road.
And that's where the good producer shows the difference. I mean, so the analogy I use in when I'm talking to somebody that doesn't know surety is we're kind of like a marriage broker. We get two people together, and hopefully then we're the marriage counselor that gets them talking to each other. In the event of a claim, where it's not a program default, it's an individual claim. A lot of times, a contractor, they stand on principle and they're pounding the desk on principle. What they're not thinking about is the time and energy they're focusing on that claim where they could be focusing on a more profitable job. So that's the kind of communication where the producer can come in, is they have that relationship with that contractor client where they can, yes, they may be settling for more money than you think it should be, but it's going to be less than what you're going to spend to get there. And that is where the surety producer can do it and can help explain the surety's perspective, but also how it's going to benefit that contractor to go ahead and let's kill it, let's put it away and move on to better and more profitable work.
You reminded me, I know it's a little off the subject, but the whole thing when a contractor is pounding and saying, this is not a righteous claim, you got to fight it, and they tell the lawyer, I'd rather pay you than blankety blank. And you think the lawyers say that's music to our ears, but of course then, very quickly, as the bills start mounting up, they realize that's not the case.
Well, I had a contractor once where it was a well driller. They were just butting heads like two rams with the owner and couldn't be in the same room. And eventually they said, look, surety, you take it over, send us the bills as they finish the project, and we'll write the checks. And that's what happened, because they realized there was no win for them to stay involved in that claim. It was better for everybody and a lot fewer ulcers if the surety took it over. Now they wanted to be accountable and they wanted to know what they were paying for over time to be sure it wasn't going sideways. But they were there cutting checks once a month till the job was finished.
And then it brings in the issue on the claim side that does impact the producer and the underwriter, is if an account is in claim, quote on air quotes around in claim, can the account get future bonding?
Oh, yes.
And well, it depends on the surety, and it depends on the claim, and it depends on the cooperativeness of the principal. Because if the principal says, well, you paid this claim, I'm not paying you back, this was over my objection, you're going to run into
That creates
a
problems.
philosophical issue
Right.
from many sureties. I have the right to settle these claims. You didn't collateralize me and say, I'll take care of the claim. My lawyer will defend me, the principal, and you, the surety. Because when you get to the large contractor level, there are routine claims like that, which can be seven-figure plus claims, where the large general contractor is fiscally able to answer for any liability that may 2-3 years down the road be realized. The problem I think you have is you have a lot of contractors who would rather not pay a valid claim today because they either need the dollar for something else or they don't have the dollar. And so they are reluctant, and sometimes their producer is reluctant to tell the surety the reality of economic life at a given time, and that creates some level of mistrust on the claim side that my principal is just not being candid with me. I think the biggest advantage that a producer can play in the claims process is they normally see the smoke before the surety sees the fire. And so if they can get in front of it and brace people that it's coming, and whether it's short-term financing, whether it's a complete workout, and say, look, my account doesn't have the money to answer for the pain that's coming. But with his cooperation, you can reduce your loss from $20 million to $10 million. And he doesn't have the indemnity for whether it's 10, 20, or 1.
Well, there's a level of trust that has to be there to begin with. If there's no trust, and that's the early notice,
Right.
that's the frank discussion, that's here's our financials and this is where we are. This is the short-term cost or the lump we've got to get over. This is the long-term benefit if you help us get there. There's a lot of trust, and again, that's the marriage counselor part. This is where you keep them talking to each other and figure out a way to move forward. Mm-hmm. at the lowest cost for everybody.
Robert, you might not even get to that whole discussion if it's a surety that has a policy that one claim, no more bonds. When I first started, there was at least one or two sureties that had that absolute rule. One claim, no more bonds. In your experience now, is that much more modified?
I don't know that it's modified, and I don't know that I'd even say that it's I think you'll run into that, but I think you'll run into that with the individual adjuster or that individual adjustment office, because I do think there's some it's just like the underwriting. You like to think you're getting a blanket for everybody and all sureties are exactly the same for every office. It isn't.
Right.
That ain't going to happen.
So Robert, going back to you smell smoke. Do you have situations where you've brought that to the attention of the surety in a way, and do you know who to go to within the surety on the claim side to elevate that information?
Typically, when you're talking smoke, the first person you're talking to is the underwriter.
Right.
I mean, that's our obligation as agents. We are the surety's representative, and we owe them that responsibility to go and talk to them and say, hey, these are the issues they're showing. This is we've hit this tripwire on this project. There's a lot of moving parts. Let's sit down and talk about it so you understand what those issues are, and bring y'all's experience. And if there's a claim, if we need to bring a claims person in, bring that claims person in to help talk about, is there ways that contractor can position themselves in defense of that contract to put them in a better position early.
Right.
The best, any problem can be addressed by time or money. The shorter the time, the more the money. The longer the time, the less the money. Typically.
Right.
Unfortunately, a lot of things when they hit the court, it just drags. Time goes out the window and money continues to pour. So. And
Robert pointed at me because he said when it hits the court, because I'm doing the trial work when everything is totally falling apart.
Right. So how often, Robert, do you get to actually meet the claims people when you're working with a surety before there's any sort of, on the front end? I've heard that some sureties actually want principals to know and meet some of the claims personnel and so forth.
It really depends on the surety
Okay.
and how they handle claims.
Okay.
The larger sureties tend to have staff of fairly decent, robust staff of claims adjusters and attorneys. There's one I work with that I talk to their attorneys monthly, just on the various accounts, because we do a lot of business together. But then some of the smaller sureties, some of the newer entrants, they don't necessarily have the staff, and they may be relying on consultants to adjust those claims. That's a little bit harder to get that dialogue going when it's a third party adjusting all the claims.
So Marilyn, about shaping expectations, providing perspective, and so forth. Are there other areas that you see that a producer can add value to a claim situation that you've encountered in your practice?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really.
No.
I mean, like, you use words like add perspective. Yeah, convincing the bond principal that they've got to do A, B, and C, or on the opposite side, convincing a surety that this claim isn't righteous, but it's the convincing part. Other than that, they're not contributing anything of money, and they're just not contributing anything. So I hate to say it, but I think that's the limit, unless John has something else. Or Robert.
I've had some instances where the producer is really the only line of communication to the principal, because it's the only person that the principal trusts. The principal doesn't know the underwriter. They may have met with them for quarterly, semi-annual, annual reviews, but they're really relying on their Robert to be their voice vis-a-vis the surety. And so, particularly with newer entrants and smaller contractors, I get from the claim side, I don't want them to crawl into a ball, and because haven't been down this road before, and all they see is $1 million loss, and they've signed this indemnity agreement, their spouse has signed this indemnity agreement, they think someone's going to come tomorrow and take their house. It's like, help me help you. And sometimes the only person who can convey that message to the principal is the producer. And to keep that dialogue line, that line of communication open, is very important, because I don't have the records. I don't know the facts of what led to the dispute. And if you're really in a position where it's going to be short-term financing, long-term financing, even a wind down of operations, help me keep the loss down. Who's going to tell? Who but the broker is the account going to listen to in terms of, what should I do? What am I really looking at? And the broker may get him the best construction counsel, or the best workout counsel, or unfortunately sometimes the best bankruptcy counsel to help give a soft landing where there's life.
But that's the question. If the broker sees they're going down, what's their motivation then to
not burn his bridges with the underwriter,
with the surety?
Right.
Gotcha.
If I'll let Robert answer that better, but I'm sure if I have 10 winners, all right, every now and then the best producer in the world is going to have a loser, and I think, and having spoken with underwriters, I want my brokers to be honest with me. When I'm not going to come yell at you about the losers, because I didn't come and give you extra attaboys for all the winners. You got your commission on the premium. All right, I'm not asking for a refund on the losers. So producer agreements may vary on that point, but for the most part, as long as we have our eyes open, your credibility to me, producer, as the underwriter, is that you're going to shoot straight. And I think that is the producer's incentive. I'll let Robert say.
That's the only incentive. I mean, it is a relationship. We are the middleman. I mean, we're the definition of the middleman, and it's taken what you're looking for as an attorney or the underwriter or the surety or whoever, and putting it in a way that the contractor understands it, but then taking that contractor's position and what their concerns are and what they believe is their defenses, and making sure that you understand that. Now, they may think there's something there as a defense that, based on your experience, ain't going to fly in a court of law.
Right.
Well, then you got to, then it's my job to go back to them and be sure to say, look, I understand what you're saying, but you get in front of the judge or, a jury of 12, you're going to be blown out of the water. So.
And a question I would have for Robert and Robert's account is, if you want to roll the dice, are you rolling with my money or are you rolling with your money? All right, because if at the end of the day the principal can answer for the decision that they made, there's more slack to be given. if you, the principal, are going to say, look, surety, fight this claim. Well, Robert Account, if you're wrong, who's going to pay it? Well, you are surety. No. Then you can't gamble with my money. All right? If it's a 40% likelihood of losing or a 60% likelihood of losing, then if I can settle at 70% and avoid the cost and avoid the risk of getting slammed on the whole thing, am I in a bad faith jurisdiction? Am I in a jurisdiction that gives attorneys fees? Because courts are getting more and more liberal, I think, in terms of awarding claimants, particularly downstream claimants, attorney's fees as a, quote, some justly do. So that's a cost I sure didn't want to deal with because I fought a claim because your account asked me to, Robert, and they were wrong and they couldn't answer for it.
Yeah, and that's the buck stops somewhere, and it's going to be the ones, it's the old golden rule. So, but if they have a defense that, they're not going to be able to cover the 70%, but they may be able to cover 30% or 35%. If they have defenses that maybe help negotiations and get you to a lower dollar, then it's discussing. Whether it's at the end of the day, it's going to be the surety's decision whether they can push it, and it's worth pushing if it's going to be their dollars first. But if you're not aware of that defense, then you have no option.
Well, a value I think that producers can bring is to explain to their client, look, if you can settle it at 35, but you don't have the liquidity to pay the 35, tell me, let's not lose an advantageous settlement because you can't fund it. And then 3 years from now, what could have been settled at 35 now settles, or there's liability at 90, plus the cost that was incurred in getting there. Don't lose a good settlement because you can't fund it. And I think a producer, now, will that put you in claim and make you unbondable? It might. That varies by the company, but I think the producer can really help the account say, look, we have to look at the totality of our program, whether it's with this surety, and sometimes now people don't stay with the same sureties forever, so you may have 4 sureties dealing with the same accounting claim, and you're really going to need the producer to be the one that is coordinating the effort. Sometimes, however, Surety 3 may say, this guy sold me a bill of goods. They were already in claim with, Sureties 1 and 2, so your credibility with Sureties 3 and 4 may be gone. Those are things we have to take into account in juggling all the pieces on a claim side.
The last thing I want to say, though, is we were asked what percentage of claims do have producer involvement. And it's pretty low. It's 25%. Some of what we're talking about sounds like there's more, but I think the audience should know that it's still, for whatever reason, whether it's on the producer side or the surety claims operation side, or the lawyer for the surety side, it's still pretty rare. Less 25% is what we
It is, and it's, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, the last 10 or 15 years we've gone with really few claims. So there's a lot of agents that have no experience with claims, and there are a lot of underwriters that don't have an experience with claims. So that's part of the purpose of doing a broadcast like this.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like there is value in those 25% of cases when a great bond producer is there and can be that middleman who's able to translate and talk to both parties and represent their clients and get make the information understandable when it might not be otherwise, and explain a situation that can be scary and uncomfortable. And
it's, contractors are optimistic by nature, but when they have a really bad job, they can get defensive, and you got to get around that and get them, kind of pull the emotion out of it for them. And that's hard to do.
That's great. Thank you guys so much for being on with us today and just talking through how a producer can really add to that claims process. It's been a terrific conversation. I didn't even have to say anything.
There you go. Happy to help. And thanks for having us.
Yeah, I hope we can all have you all back sometime again to talk about something else as well.
It was fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. You've been listening to Let's Get Surety, brought to you by the National Association of Surety Bond Producers. For more information about the NASBP and its members, visit nasbp.org.
Before we go, we just wanted to thank EMC Bond again for their generous support in sponsoring this episode of Let's Get Surety. EMC Bond prioritizes personalized service in every aspect of their business. When you partner with them, you'll receive stable, responsive, and timely solutions rooted in strong relationships. To learn more about EMC Bond, their products, services, and personalized approach, visit emcinsurance.com/bond.